Are you ready for a story that literally broke the internet and rewrote music history? The year is 2026, and just when the haters thought the kings were dethroned, BTS returned from their hiatus to deliver a chilling reality check. They didn't just make a highly anticipated comeback, they completely silenced the world and destroyed all rivals without breaking a single sweat. But how exactly did 7 men from South Korea pull off the impossible in a cutthroat industry designed to eventually tear everyone down? What insane, untold master plans did they secretly orchestrate while they were apart, only to execute them flawlessly the exact second they reunited? Buckle up and get ready to have your mind absolutely blown, because we are diving deep into the raw facts, the hidden emotions, and the absolute madness of their ultimate global triumph. This is chilling. 7 insane proofs BTS in 2026 silenced the world and destroyed all rivals. Are you brave enough to witness the undeniable truth? Number 7. Jin, the silver voice, immortalized. Imagine the exact moment the clock struck midnight in Seoul on that fateful day in 2026. The global music industry was collectively holding its breath, waiting for the very first official strike of BTS's ultimate, highly anticipated reunion. And it was none other than Kim Jin who delivered the opening blow that left the entire world absolutely paralyzed and gasping for air. For years, the cutthroat industry and rival companies had desperately tried to push the false narrative that Jin was merely the visual of the group, a pretty face meant only to attract fans while others carried the heavy musical weight. But in 2026, Jin didn't just casually debunk that disrespectful myth, he completely obliterated it, burning down the very foundations of every critic's argument with a vocal and visual masterpiece so incredibly profound that it literally caused global streaming platforms to crash and burn within the first 4 minutes of its release. We are talking about an unprecedented multimedia project, a cinematic visual album where Jin finally flawlessly merged his prestigious acting background from Jungkook University with his evolution into an undisputed world-class vocal powerhouse. When his pre-release track dropped, it wasn't just another pop song. It was a hauntingly beautiful theatrical rock ballad that showcased a vocal range so insanely expansive and emotionally raw that classical vocal coaches and contemporary producers across the globe spent weeks uploading hours of reaction videos and analysis, entirely baffled by his flawless breath control, deep resonance, and the sheer agonizing emotion he poured into every single syllable. Do you realize how terrifying it is for Western pop stars and massive record labels when a single member of a Korean group, acting as the vanguard for the ultimate group comeback, drops a solo project that accidentally dethrones the biggest Western artists from the Billboard Hot 100 top spot in less than 24 hours, entirely unprompted and with absolutely zero radio play or playlisting support? Rival PR agencies were in absolute shambles, reportedly holding frantic emergency meetings because the Jin effect had completely hijacked the global algorithm. You literally couldn't scroll through any social media platform, be it TikTok, X, or Instagram, without hearing his crystal-clear silver voice belting out that chilling, impossible high note that became an instant, inescapable cultural phenomenon. But the true terrifying insanity of Jin's 2026 domination wasn't just found in the numbers, though the numbers were historically terrifying. We are talking about millions of pure physical sales flying off the shelves, billion-tier streaming milestones reached in record-shattering time, and elite luxury houses like Gucci and Cartier literally engaging in a vicious, high-stakes financial bidding war just to get him to wear their pieces in a single promotional concept photo. It was the profound atmospheric shift he created across the entire entertainment globe. He carried the massive emotional weight of being the group's eldest member, the pioneer who first left for the military, the one who promised to hold the fort while the others served, and now he was returning as an absolute titan, standing dead center in the middle of a colossal, sold-out stadium, the chaotic lights suddenly dimming to a single, piercing spotlight. Let's paint the vivid picture for a second. 90,000 fans holding their breath, absolute dead silence echoing through the massive concrete arena. And then Jin opens his mouth and delivers a live vocal performance so impossibly stable, so heartbreakingly perfect, that it genuinely sounded better than the heavily produced studio recording, proving definitively that he is not just an idol, but a legendary artist who commands the stage with the intimidating presence of a seasoned emperor. The chilling realization for every other entertainment company watching from the sidelines was that if Jin, the supposed soft vocalist of the group, could single-handedly orchestrate a global cultural reset that dominated Hollywood, the fashion world, and the international music charts all at the exact same time, then what in the absolute world was the full reunited septet going to do to them? Jin's 2026 era proved that he didn't just survive the grueling hiatus, he spent every waking second in the shadows sharpening his blade, perfecting his craft, and preparing to silence the world with a majestic, lethal grace that only worldwide handsome could deliver. He shattered the glass ceiling of what a boy band member could achieve in their 30s, turning his emotional vulnerability into an impenetrable shining armor that no rival could ever hope to pierce. How do you even begin to compete with a man who can convey 1,000 tragic words with a single, perfectly timed tear in a music video, and then proceed to hit a shattering, crystal-clear high F note live in front of millions without missing a single beat or breaking a sweat? You don't compete. You simply bow down, grab your popcorn, and witness history being written in real time. Because Jin in 2026 wasn't just making a comeback, he was ruthlessly staking his claim as a timeless vocal king, leaving the rest of the industry scrambling in the dust of his unparalleled, breathtaking wake. And as if that wasn't enough to make the haters tremble in fear, the highly anticipated behind-the-scenes documentary of his preparation revealed a man of terrifying focus and relentless work ethic, practicing in the dead of night until his throat was raw, obsessing over every cinematic frame and lighting cue of his visual album, and actively producing the haunting melodies that would become the undisputed global anthem of 2026. He proved to the world that true, lasting talent isn't just born, it is violently forged in the fires of relentless dedication and an unyielding, desperate desire to protect his brother's legendary legacy. Can you even begin to fathom the psychological damage inflicted on rival fandoms and bitter executives who had secretly prayed for BTS's downfall, only to see Jin effortlessly sweep up Song of the Year nominations, while simultaneously breaking the internet's server infrastructure just by posting a single casual makeup-free selfie on Weverse? The sheer, terrifying duality of his existence, the charming, chaotic older brother who makes dad jokes and bickers with his members, transforming instantly into this ethereal vocal god who commands the global economy with a simple flick of his wrist, is the exact reason why his 2026 triumph was so absolute, complete, and utterly chilling. He set the bar so incredibly high that it became painfully, blindingly obvious to everyone. BTS operates in an entirely different stratosphere, a league completely of their own, and Jin was the glorious, blinding supernova that heralded their devastating, triumphant return to the throne. His monumental impact rippled through the global economy, directly influencing massive fashion trends, boosting the tourism industry of South Korea back to pre-pandemic levels within a single month as fans obsessively flocked to the remote filming locations of his epic music videos, and even causing a sudden massive spike in the stock market shares of his parent company, a financial phenomenon Wall Street analysts literally dubbed the Sek Jin shockwave. It was an absolute masterclass in global domination, executed with the polite, blindingly beautiful smile of a man who knows exactly how powerful he is, leaving the world completely silenced, utterly defeated, and desperately begging for more of his art. How could anyone ever doubt the eldest brother, the pillar of BTS? The chilling truth is, they never should have, and his 2026 supremacy is the permanent, historical proof that Kim Sek-jin is, and always will be, completely and utterly untouchable.
Number 6. Suga, the mastermind's ruthless trap, destroying the industry. What happens when the quietest, most observant man in the room finally decides that he has heard enough of the industry's fabricated noise and chooses to speak his absolute, unfiltered truth? For months following his military discharge, Min Yoongi, globally feared and revered as Suga of BTS and the underground king August D, went completely radio silent, leaving the cutthroat media desperately grasping at straws and rival companies arrogantly assuming that the rap genius had finally lost his legendary edge or decided to step back into the comfortable shadows of retirement. But how brutally, catastrophically wrong they were, because while the rest of the pop world was busy churning out generic, algorithm-friendly 30-second viral TikTok sounds with ghostwriters doing all the heavy lifting, Yoongi was locked inside his genius lab, brewing a catastrophic musical storm that would permanently alter the DNA of the 2026 global music landscape. Imagine the sheer terror that ripped through the boardrooms of massive Western record labels when at exactly 3 in the morning Korean Standard Time, with absolutely zero pre-release marketing, no flashy billboard campaigns, and not a single whisper of a press release, a mysterious, unlisted streaming link was casually dropped on his personal social media. Within exactly 12 minutes, that single link generated so much unprecedented traffic that it literally caused major global streaming servers to crash, triggering panic among tech engineers who thought they were experiencing a coordinated cyber attack. But the reality was far more terrifying for the industry. Yoongi had just unleashed a colossal, self-produced, 15-track hip-hop magnum opus that mercilessly ripped the mask off the entire entertainment business. This wasn't just an album. It was a brutal, sonic execution of every fake artist and corrupt executive who ever doubted the sincerity of BTS's artistry. How do you even attempt to fight a man who owns the very pen that writes the rules of the game? From the very first agonizingly heavy piano chord, a haunting homage to his first love, the brown piano in his childhood home, to the blistering, venomous trap beats layered with traditional Korean hagum sounds, Yoongi spit fire at a terrifying speed of over 10 syllables per second, his razor-sharp lyricism casually dissecting the hypocrisy of chart manipulation, the emptiness of superficial fame, and the blood-sucking nature of media vultures who prey on artists' mental health. He didn't just top the Billboard 200, he completely hijacked it, locking out major Western superstars who had spent tens of millions of dollars on their own album rollouts, proving definitively that pure, raw, bleeding authenticity will always, without fail, slaughter manufactured hype. But the true, chilling insanity of Suga's 2026 domination lay in the devastating emotional contrast he presented to the world. This was the same boy from the impoverished streets of Daegu who once had to choose between eating a bowl of noodles or taking the bus home. The same teenager who shattered his shoulder in a tragic delivery accident just to survive. The same artist who battled crippling depression and social anxiety in the darkest corners of his mind. And now, he was standing atop the highest pinnacle of global supremacy, casually holding the entire industry hostage with a microphone and a laptop. Did you ever think that one man sitting in a perfectly dark room could completely paralyze the biggest music conglomerates in the world? Rival rappers who had previously built their entire careers on fake gangster personas and borrowed street cred suddenly found themselves looking incredibly foolish and painfully quiet, completely humiliated by a Korean idol who effortlessly blended blistering hardcore rap with breakhearting vulnerability. Yoongi's lyrical genius in 2026 cut so incredibly deep into the core of the human condition that prestigious literary critics and university poetry professors began dissecting his verses in academic journals, analyzing his masterful use of double entendres, complex rhyme schemes, and profound philosophical reflections on mortality, trauma, and healing. He exposed the dirty secret of the music world, that so many top artists are merely puppets reading scripts, by proving that he writes, composes, produces, and executes every single breath of his art entirely by himself. And the financial shockwave, it was absolutely biblical. Desperate A-list Western artists and legendary pop icons began publicly begging for a prod Suga credit on their upcoming projects, initiating multi-million-dollar bidding wars just to secure a beat from the Genius Lab, fully aware that his Midas touch was the only guaranteed ticket to musical relevance in 2026. Yet, Suga remained famously untouchable, turning down obscene amounts of money to instead produce a breathtakingly raw acoustic ballad for BTS's highly anticipated reunion album, a track so profoundly beautiful and emotionally devastating that made grown men weep on the first listen. When he finally took the stage for his first solo live performance of the year, there were no backup dancers, no massive pyrotechnics, no flashy costume changes. It was just Min Yoongi, a single spotlight, a grand piano, and an acoustic guitar. The chilling, dead silence of 80,000 screaming fans as he closed his eyes and poured a decade of accumulated pain, triumph, and brotherhood into a single, breathtaking vocal performance was a moment of sheer, terrifying power that no other artist on the planet could ever hope to replicate. He proved that the most lethal weapon in the world isn't fame, money, or industry connections. It is the unyielding, unvarnished truth delivered by a survivor who has absolutely nothing left to fear. Suga's 2026 reign wasn't just a musical comeback. It was a terrifyingly brilliant, masterful checkmate on a chessboard he had been secretly manipulating for years, leaving the entire world stunned, silent, and deeply bowing to the underground king who conquered the universe without ever compromising his soul.
Number 5. J-Hope, the lethal eclipse annihilating the global stage. What happens when the group's brightest ray of sunshine suddenly decides to completely eclipse the entire entertainment industry with a shadow so terrifyingly brilliant, so flawlessly executed that it leaves the world's greatest performers physically trembling in absolute awe? For years, the global media comfortably labeled Jungkook, internationally revered as J-Hope, as the mood maker and the smiling hope of BTS, severely underestimating the lethal, calculating perfectionist lurking just beneath that blindingly bright exterior. But in 2026, he didn't just return from his military service to smile for the cameras. He came back with a dark, intimidating, and overwhelmingly powerful aura that ruthlessly annihilated every single standard of live performance currently existing on the planet. Can you even imagine the sheer, unadulterated panic that ripped through the choreography studios of rival entertainment companies when J-Hope nonchalantly dropped a surprise feature-length dance film in the middle of a random Tuesday, entirely unannounced, only for it to instantly debut at #1 in over 100 countries and cause global ticketing platforms to completely self-destruct within minutes? We are not just talking about a simple music video. This was a visceral, raw, cinematic masterpiece that documented his underground street dance roots violently colliding with his reigning status as a global pop emperor, showcasing a level of physical isolation, popping, and bone-breaking fluidity so impossibly precise that elite professional dancers and veteran choreographers across Hollywood and Seoul were forced to publicly admit they couldn't even comprehend the physics behind his movements. How do you possibly compete with a man who uses his own body as an instrument of mass destruction, effortlessly translating agonizing emotion, historical trauma, and triumphant victory into a singular, gravity-defying sequence that leaves millions of viewers completely paralyzed, gasping for air behind their screens? But the chilling insanity of J-Hope's 2026 domination wasn't strictly confined to his solo supremacy. It was the terrifying, dictatorial grip he tightened around the entire BTS reunion project as their undisputed performance director, acting as the grueling, unrelenting drill sergeant who whipped the greatest boy band in history back into god-tier shape. Imagine the utter despair of rival groups who had spent millions trying to perfectly synchronize their routines during BTS's hiatus, only to wake up one morning to a casually uploaded, unedited black and white dance practice video from the septet that effortlessly racked up a mind-bending 100 million views in less than 24 hours, completely breaking the YouTube algorithm. In that raw footage, you could vividly see J-Hope standing at the front of the mirror, his eyes completely devoid of his signature playful warmth, replaced instead by the piercing, terrifying gaze of an apex predator scanning for the slightest millimeter-wide imperfection in their formation. His relentless dedication proved that their legendary synchronization wasn't just a byproduct of talent, but the result of his grueling, agonizing, blood, sweat, and tears perfectionism that absolutely refused to accept anything less than historical immortality. The financial world wasn't safe from his lethal impact either. Luxury titans like Louis Vuitton and emerging avant-garde street brands engaged in a vicious, public, multi-million-dollar bloodbath just to secure him as their global ambassador for the 2026 era, fully realizing that a single paparazzi photo of Hoseok casually walking down the streets of Paris or New York in their garments would instantly crash their e-commerce websites and sell out their entire seasonal inventory in a matter of seconds. Did the industry honestly believe that the man who made history as the first South Korean artist to ever headline a major U.S. festival at Lollapalooza, a legendary night forever immortalized in the history books as Hopi-Palooza, would simply return to the stage to politely share the spotlight? Absolutely not. His 2026 comeback stage was a terrifying, apocalyptic spectacle of blazing pyrotechnics, live heavy metal bands infused with raw, golden-era hip-hop beats, and an army of backup dancers who looked utterly terrified to even breathe out of sync with their commander. When he grabbed the microphone, completely drenched in sweat, his chest heaving as he delivered a live rap verse so aggressively fast, so impeccably articulate, and layered with such venomous, razor-sharp lyricism against the media vultures who tried to drag his brothers down, the entire arena of 80,000 people fell into a breathless, terrified silence before erupting into a deafening roar that literally registered on local seismographs as a minor earthquake. J-Hope completely destroyed the disrespectful narrative that dancers can't be elite musicians, simultaneously producing, writing, and choreographing a magnum opus that obliterated the Billboard charts without a single ounce of Western playlisting support, proving that true organic artistry will always violently slaughter manufactured, label-funded hype. His evolution from the energetic street dancer of Gwangju to this untouchable, terrifyingly magnetic maestro of the global stage was the ultimate chilling checkmate to every critic who ever dared to confine him to a single box. He showed the world that his hope wasn't a soft, fragile thing, but a blazing, blinding, unstoppable inferno designed to burn down the old, corrupt establishment and forge an entirely new era of performance art from the ashes. How can any other artist look at themselves in the mirror after witnessing the sheer, insurmountable mountain of talent, discipline, and raw, feral energy that J-Hope unleashed in 2026? They can't, because he didn't just raise the bar, he picked it up, snapped it in half with a single flawless pop and lock, and left the entire world absolutely silenced, deeply humbled, and completely addicted to the lethal eclipse of his undeniable supremacy.
Number 4. RM, the architect of a new era. Intellectual supremacy, absolute. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the very brain of the global music industry decides to stop playing the game and starts rewriting the entire rule book from scratch? In the high-stakes year of 2026, Kim Namjoon, the legendary leader known to the world as RM, didn't just return to the spotlight. He descended upon the entertainment landscape like a colossal, intellectual tidal wave that completely submerged every shallow, manufactured rival in its path. For years, while he was serving his country, the industry's critics and bitter competitors whispered in the shadows, hoping that the BTS era was a fading fever dream. Yet the second Namjoon stepped back into the genius lab, he unleashed a psychological and cultural masterclass that proved he wasn't just a rapper, but the undisputed architect of a new global civilization of art. Imagine the absolute chilling silence that fell over the world's most prestigious auction houses and art galleries when RM announced a secret multi-city Namjooning global exhibition that seamlessly blended his 2026 solo album with physical masterpieces from forgotten Korean artists he had spent years privately researching. He didn't just drop music, he created a physical and spiritual sanctuary that forced the entire world to slow down, think, and weep in a way no pop star has ever dared to attempt. How do you even begin to compete with a man who can turn a simple museum visit into a multi-billion-dollar boost for the global tourism industry, causing flights to Seoul to sell out in seconds because millions of people desperately wanted to see the world through his philosophical lens? The sheer, terrifying power of his 2026 return lay in his monologue of the Soul Project, an experimental, genre-bending odyssey that featured collaborations with underground jazz legends, classical orchestras, and avant-garde poets, completely bypassing the desperate, thirsty trends of TikTok and radio play to instead reach straight into the collective consciousness of humanity. Rival labels were left in a state of absolute paralyzed despair as they watched RM's difficult and intellectual art outperform their most expensive chart-chasing pop hits, proving definitively that the global audience was starving for the depth and sincerity that only Namjoon could provide. But the most chilling moment of his 2026 dominance occurred during his historic keynote speech at the United Nations Future of Youth Summit, his third appearance on that world stage, where he didn't just read a prepared script, but delivered a 20-minute unscripted raw reflection on the weight of leadership, the pain of the hiatus, and the terrifying beauty of starting over. The video of that speech didn't just go viral, it became a mandatory part of university curricula across the globe, with world leaders and political analysts publicly marveling at a musician who possessed more gravitas and intellectual clarity than most seasoned diplomats. How can any other K-pop groups or Western boy bands even pretend to be leaders when they are compared to the man who literally held the emotional and strategic fragments of the world's biggest group together through a grueling military separation, emerging not as a broken idol, but as a towering statesman-like figure of the 21st century? The financial impact of the RM effect in 2026 was so massive that economic journals dubbed it the Namjoon dividend, as his public endorsement of obscure bookstores, independent artists, and traditional Korean crafts saved dozens of small industries from the brink of collapse, proving that his influence was no longer just about selling albums, but about shifting the very tectonic plates of global culture. When he finally reunited with his brothers for the first time on camera in 2026, the look in his eyes wasn't one of relief, but of a general who had successfully navigated his troops through the darkest valley and was now ready to reclaim the entire mountain. His leadership in 2026 was so absolute, so surgical in its precision, that it made the efforts of rival concept groups look like amateur theater in comparison.
He silenced the world, not by shouting, but by speaking in a whisper so profound that everyone else had to stop breathing just to hear him, effectively destroying the rivalry by moving BTS into a category of existence that transcends music entirely. They became a living, breathing, historical monument. Can you fathom the psychological damage inflicted on the next BTS hopefuls when they realized that RM's 2026 lyrical depth was so advanced that AI algorithms struggled to decode his metaphors, leaving human critics in a state of perpetual humbled awe? He proved that his brain is the most lethal weapon in the BTS arsenal, a strategic powerhouse that spent the hiatus analyzing every flaw in the industry's armor, only to strike back with a cultural reset that made everything else look like ancient history. The chilling reality for every other artist in 2026 was this: as long as Kim Namjoon is holding the pen, the story of BTS will never end, and any rival who tries to take his throne will find themselves lost in the labyrinth of a mind they can never hope to understand. He didn't just return, he redefined what it means to be a global icon, leaving the world silenced, the rivals destroyed, and the history books wide open for his next brilliant move. How can anyone possibly top a man who turned his most vulnerable moments into a global manifesto for healing?
Number 3, Jimin, the ethereal apex, a chilling cultural reset. Can you feel that sudden, sharp drop in temperature, that prickle on the back of your neck that only happens when a true, once-in-a-century legend decides to reclaim his stolen throne with a grace so lethal it borders on the supernatural? When the year 2026 finally dawned, the global music industry was already reeling from the previous members' strikes, but nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared the world for the return of Park Jimin, the man whose very name had become synonymous with the Jimin effect, a literal sociological phenomenon that researchers were still trying to decode while he was away serving his country. For 18 long months, rival agencies had desperately tried to manufacture a new Jimin, pushing young idols to mimic his signature contemporary dance-infused pop, his high-fashion androgyny, and that specific, heart-stopping gaze that seems to pierce through a camera lens and touch the viewer's very soul. But when the real Jimin finally stepped out of the military gates in 2026, he didn't just return, he executed a chilling, effortless purge of every pretender who had dared to occupy his space. Imagine the absolute breathless pandemonium when he announced his 2026 magnum opus, a project that didn't just top the charts, but literally rewrote the definition of what a solo artist could achieve in the modern era. This wasn't just a collection of songs, but a visceral, soul-bearing exploration of identity, sacrifice, and the terrifying weight of being the world's most desired it boy. How do you even begin to comprehend the sheer, raw power of a man who can release a single 30-second teaser featuring nothing but the sound of his rhythmic breathing and a silhouette of his legendary dance lines and cause the global stock prices of LVMH and Dior to skyrocket by billions of dollars in a single trading session? The industry was left in a state of paralyzed shock as Jimin's 2026 solo album, Eclipse of the Soul, shattered every single record held by Western pop giants, achieving more #1 spots on iTunes in its first 6 hours than most artists achieve in a lifetime, all while maintaining a level of artistic integrity that felt almost dangerously pure. But the most chilling, spine-tingling moment of his 2026 domination was undoubtedly his Resurrection World Tour, a performance art piece so technically demanding and emotionally taxing that elite athletes and world-renowned ballet dancers were seen in the front rows, weeping openly at the sheer, impossible athleticism and fluid grace he displayed under the blinding stadium lights.
We are talking about a man who in 2026 perfected a style of performance that blended high-octane pop choreography with the haunting, gravity-defying techniques of modern dance, moving across the stage like a ghost, a flame, and a god all at once, leaving 90,000 fans in a state of collective hypnotic trance. Do you realize how terrifying it was for the rival groups of 2026 to have to follow a performance where Jimin, standing alone in the center of a massive water-filled stage, delivered a live vocal performance so crystal clear and emotionally devastating that it felt like he was whispering his darkest secrets directly into your ear, even from the back row of a stadium? The Jimin effect in 2026 wasn't just about fashion or fame. It was a total, undisputed cultural occupation where every major magazine cover from Vogue to Time featured his ethereal, matured visage, and every high-end brand fought a literal war behind closed doors just to have him mention their name in a casual live stream. He silenced the world's critics who claimed his success was a fluke of the idol system by becoming a mentor and a beacon for the next generation of artists, all while remaining so humble and deeply connected to his roots in Busan that his every move felt like a warm embrace for the millions of armies who had waited for his return. The chilling reality for his rivals was the realization that Jimin hadn't just maintained his peak during his hiatus. He had somehow evolved into a more dangerous, more focused, and more untouchable version of himself. A man who could command the attention of the entire planet with a single slow-motion hair flip or a devastatingly high belted note that echoed through the halls of music history. His 2026 era proved that he was the frontman of a global revolution, a performer whose DNA was woven into the very fabric of the 21st century's aesthetic, making any attempt to compete with him feel like trying to outshine the sun with a flickering candle. How can you possibly measure the impact of a man who caused a global shortage of the specific artisan tea he mentioned drinking during a late-night Weverse live, or the way he single-handedly revitalized the contemporary dance industry by inspiring millions of young people to take up the art form? The 2026 version of Park Jimin was a lethal combination of soft-spoken vulnerability and an ironclad will. A man who had seen the heights of fame and the quiet of the barracks and came back with a message that the world was finally ready to hear. That true power lies in the courage to be yourself, even when the whole world is watching you and waiting for you to fail. He didn't just destroy his rivals, he made the very concept of rivalry irrelevant, because in 2026 there was only one Jimin, and the rest of the world was just lucky enough to be living in his era. Can you even fathom the psychological weight of standing on a stage knowing that your every breath is being analyzed by millions, and yet still having the audacity to deliver a performance so raw and unpolished that it feels like a private conversation? That is the chilling, beautiful paradox of Jimin in 2026, the boy who became a king, the dancer who became a movement, and the artist who silenced the world by simply existing in his most authentic, terrifyingly beautiful form. His 2026 return wasn't just a comeback, it was a declaration of war against mediocrity, a masterclass in global influence, and a permanent reminder that some lights are so bright they can never, ever be extinguished. Every chart, every brand, and every heart belonged to him in 2026, and as the final notes of his solo tour rang out across the globe, the silence that followed wasn't one of absence, but of a world finally, deeply, and utterly humbled by the presence of a true living legend.
Number 2V, the soulful visionary, redefining the global aesthetic. Can you imagine the sheer, heart-stopping intensity of a world where a single, silent gaze from one man can literally shift the entire global economy and redefine the meaning of cool for an entire generation? As we move into the penultimate spot of our chilling countdown, we have to talk about the man who didn't just return to the stage in 2026, but who essentially ascended to a level of stardom that feels more like a cinematic legend than a pop idol. We are talking about Kim Tae-hung, the one and only V. For years, the industry tried to box him in, calling him the secret weapon or just the visual powerhouse. But in 2026, V took those boxes and set them on fire with a soulful, jazz-infused elegance that left his rivals looking like children playing dress-up. The chilling truth of 2026 was that while every other artist was chasing the next hyper-pop trend or trying to go viral with a 15-second dance challenge, Tae-hung went in the completely opposite direction, releasing a visual symphony that was so incredibly sophisticated, it felt like a time-traveling masterpiece from the golden age of Hollywood, mixed with a futuristic neo-soul vibe that no one saw coming. Think about the absolute panic in the boardrooms of luxury fashion houses when V decided to launch his own 2026 Tae-hung Noir aesthetic. We are talking about the Celine boy and Cartier ambassador who doesn't just wear clothes, he creates a cultural atmosphere so thick and intoxicating that you can practically feel it through your screen. When his lead single dropped in early 2026, it wasn't a high-energy dance track, it was a deep, baritone jazz-pop ballad that showcased a vocal range so rich and velvety that music critics actually started comparing him to legends like Bing Crosby and Chet Baker, but with a modern, rebellious edge that only V could pull off. Do you realize how terrifying it is for a rival company when their top-tier idols are struggling to get a few million views, while V can post a blurry black-and-white photo of himself playing the saxophone in a dimly lit Paris bar and cause the entire internet to collapse under the weight of his V-cut influence? The Tae-hung effect in 2026 reached a point of absolute insanity. He didn't even need to promote his projects traditionally because the world was already obsessed with his every move, his every sartorial choice, and his every artistic recommendation. We saw a literal jazz renaissance triggered by his 2026 solo album, where vinyl record sales for classic jazz artists spiked by 400% globally, just because V mentioned them in a handwritten note shared on his Instagram. But what was truly chilling was his performance at the 2026 Cannes Film Festival, where he wasn't just there as a guest, but as the star and creative director of a short film that accompanied his album. The moment he stepped onto that red carpet, the literal air seemed to leave the lungs of everyone present as he exuded a level of old-school movie star gravitas that hasn't been seen in decades. Rival agencies were reportedly having V crisis meetings, trying to figure out how to replicate his effortless, I'm not even trying charisma, only to realize that you can't manufacture a soul as deep and complex as Kim Tae-hung's. His 2026 era was a masterclass in being unbothered, authentic, and breathtakingly unique. He proved that he wasn't just a member of the world's biggest group, but a singular, generational talent who could command the attention of the global elite and the underground art scene simultaneously. How do you even begin to compete with a man who can make a 5-minute-long music video consisting mostly of him just staring into the camera and have it analyzed by film students and psychologists for its haunting emotional depth? The financial impact was just as staggering. 2026 saw the V brand becoming a literal juggernaut, where any obscure vintage brand he wore would be sold out globally within minutes, creating a supply chain nightmare for retailers who couldn't keep up with the Tae-hung demand. But beyond the money and the fame, there was this chilling, quiet confidence he carried in 2026. He spoke less in interviews, but said more with his art, focusing on themes of solitude, the beauty of the mundane, and the deep love he has for his Winter Bear fans and his brothers in BTS. He effectively silenced the world by proving that being the best doesn't mean being the loudest or the fastest. It means being the most unforgettable.
When he finally reunited with the other 6 members for their first joint performance of 2026, V didn't have to do much. He just stood there, a slight enigmatic smirk on his face, and delivered a vocal line so deep and resonant that it felt like it was vibrating in the very bones of the 90,000 people in the stadium. It was a chilling reminder that while many can sing and many can dance, only one man can hold the entire world in the palm of his hand with just a single soulful note and a look that says, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He destroyed his rivals not by fighting them, but simply by outclassing them in every possible dimension of artistry, leaving the industry in a state of perpetual V fever that showed no signs of breaking. Can you even fathom the level of influence it takes to make the entire world fall in love with jazz and classical aesthetics in the middle of a digital high-speed age? That was the magic of Taehyung in 2026, a man who bridged the gap between the past and the future, making the world stop and listen to the beat of his own uniquely beautiful heart. He didn't just silence the critics, he made them his biggest fans, proving that true beauty and true art are the most powerful weapons of all. And now, as we stand on the precipice of our final point, can you feel the tension in the air? Because if V was the soul, then our number 1 is the absolute unstoppable force that finally broke the world.
Number 1, Jungkook, the golden singularity, the final global takeover. What happens when the most powerful, versatile, and influential young artist on the planet finally reaches his absolute peak, only to realize he still has gears the world hasn't even seen yet? If 2023 was the year of 7 and the initial golden explosion, then 2026 was the year Jungkook officially became the undisputed sun around which the entire global music industry revolves. A chilling golden singularity that pulled every rival, every record, and every critic into its irresistible, crushing gravitational field. For years, the Western industry tried to treat his success as a lightning-in-a-bottle moment or a result of a massive fandom, but in 2026, Jungkook returned from his military service and delivered a performance-driven cultural reset so violent and absolute that it effectively ended the K-pop versus pop debate forever by simply ascending to a throne that had been vacant since the era of Michael Jackson. Imagine the sheer, bone-chilling terror that paralyzed the marketing departments of every major American pop star when the rumors were finally confirmed. Jungkook was headlining the 2026 Super Bowl halftime show, not as a guest, not as part of a special K-pop segment, but as the main solo attraction. The world watched in stunned, breathless silence as he descended from the rafters of the stadium in a high-tech, aerodynamic suit, landing on a stage that was pulsating with the energy of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for this singular moment of global dominance. The performance wasn't just a concert, it was a 15-minute tactical strike of pure, unadulterated talent that showcased vocal stability while performing gravity-defying stunts that made the world's most elite athletes look like amateurs. How do you even begin to compete with a man who can sing a perfect high-register ad-lib while executing a backflip, all while maintaining a charismatic, predatory gaze that made 1 billion viewers across the globe feel like he was looking directly into their souls? The 2026 Jungkook effect wasn't just a trend. It was a total scorched earth takeover of the digital and physical world, where his sophomore solo album, The Phoenix, debuted with numbers so astronomical they were literally flagged by chart tracking systems as potential glitches. We are talking about an album that occupied the top 10 spots of the Billboard Hot 100 simultaneously, a feat that caused the industry's most powerful executives to hold emergency meetings to discuss the Jungkook problem. The fact that one man from South Korea was now more powerful than their entire roster of artists combined.
Rival companies were in absolute shambles, their 2026 release schedules completely abandoned because nobody wanted to go head-to-head with the Golden Maknae, who was currently breaking the world record for the most streamed song in 24 hours for the third time in a single year. But the true chilling insanity of his 2026 reign lay in his role as the final piece of the BTS reunion puzzle. When he stood back on that stage with his 6 older brothers, the energy he brought was no longer that of the shy, wide-eyed boy from Busan, but of a seasoned, lethal commander of the global stage who had seen everything and conquered it all. His vocals in 2026 had matured into something almost terrifyingly powerful, a rich, soulful texture that could bridge the gap between a gritty rock anthem and a heartbreaking R&B ballad in the blink of an eye, leaving professional vocal coaches in a state of perpetual, humbled shock. Do you realize the psychological damage inflicted on the next generation of idols and pop stars when they witnessed Jungkook in 2026? A man who had already achieved everything possible, still practicing his footwork and vocal runs for 16 hours a day in a dimly lit studio, driven by an unyielding, desperate hunger for perfection that most humans can't even comprehend. He silenced the world not just with his numbers, but with a work ethic that was so intense it became a legend in itself, proving that his golden status wasn't a gift, but a weapon he had forged through a decade of blood, sweat, and tears. The financial impact of Jungkook 2026 was a literal global phenomenon. His collaboration with high-end tech and fashion brands didn't just sell out, they caused literal server meltdowns and physical riots in major cities, while his endorsement of a simple, obscure brand of kombucha or a specific workout routine caused entire industries to pivot their production lines just to keep up with the JK demand. But beyond the glitz and the terrifying power, there was a raw, emotional vulnerability that he shared with his fans in 2026, a series of late-night, unedited live streams where he spoke about the pressure of the world's expectations, the loneliness of the top, and the absolute, undying love he has for his members and army. This was the most chilling part of all. He was the world's biggest star, yet he remained the most human, a man who would rather spend 3 hours talking to his fans through a screen than attend a high-profile Hollywood afterparty. He destroyed the very concept of rivalry by moving into a space where he had no competitors, only peers among the legends of history, effectively making every other pop artist look like a temporary distraction in the face of his permanent legacy. In 2026, Jungkook didn't just return, he evolved into a golden god of the modern era, a singular force of nature who silenced the world's doubts, destroyed the industry's barriers, and led BTS back to the very top of the mountain with a defiant, triumphant roar that will echo through history for decades to come. As the final notes of the 2026 BTS World Tour rang out, with Jungkook standing at the center of the stage, his arms wide, his face drenched in sweat and tears, the world finally understood the terrifying truth. The golden era wasn't just a phase, it was the beginning of an eternal reign. Who could ever hope to follow that? Who could ever hope to rival a man who has the world's heart in his pocket and his voice in his throat? The answer is simple. Nobody. In 2026, Jungkook and BTS didn't just win, they broke it, leaving us all in a state of chilling, beautiful awe.
So there you have it. 7 chilling, undeniable proofs that BTS didn't just survive the hiatus, they used it to sharpen their skills and return as an unstoppable force that literally broke the global entertainment system in 2026. From Jin's ethereal vocals and Suga's ruthless production to J-Hope's stage dominance, RM's intellectual leadership, Jimin's cultural reset, V's soulful vision, and finally, Jungkook's absolute global takeover, the world has never seen anything quite like this. The critics who predicted their decline are now silent, the rivals who tried to take their spot have been left in the dust, and the industry itself has been forced to evolve just to keep up with the septet's new imperial standard. 2026 wasn't just a comeback year, it was a total reclamation of the throne, proving once and for all that while many groups can be famous, only BTS is legendary. They didn't just return to the music scene, they became the scene itself. As they stand together again, stronger than ever, one thing is perfectly clear. The Chapter 2 we all feared was just the prologue to their most terrifyingly brilliant era yet. The world isn't just watching anymore, the world is finally listening.